He seriously believes those kids are his. I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the front door handle. My name is Matthew Cole, and I had just heard my wife of 12 years destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I was 41 years old, a high school biology teacher in Austin, Texas, and apparently the biggest fool who ever lived. Trina was in the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she thought she was being clever. The school retreat had ended early due to a storm, and I had driven home through the rain, looking forward to surprising her. Instead, I stood there listening to her laugh about the greatest deception of my life. Can you believe it? 12 years and he is completely clueless. Eric and I always joke about it. Matthew is the ultimate idiot. My legs felt weak. Sophie was 10. Tyler was 8. They had my eyes, or so I had always thought. They called me Dad. I coached Tyler's little league team. Sophie and I worked on science projects together every weekend. The irony was not lost on me that I taught genetics for a living, yet apparently could not see what was right in front of me. The best part is how proud he gets when people say Tyler looks just like him, Trina continued, her voice dripping with amusement. Like father, like son. If only he knew. I set my keys down silently on the entry table. My hands were shaking, but my mind was already starting to work. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of believing I was building a family with someone who loved me. 12 years of being played for a fool while she laughed about it with her friends. Eric wants me to tell him soon. She said he thinks it is time the kids knew who their real father is. But honestly, why rock the boat? Matthew pays for everything, does all the hard work, and Eric gets to be the fun guy they see on weekends when I tell Matthew I am going to my sister's house. I backed toward the door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure she would hear it. But Trina kept talking, completely oblivious to the fact that her perfect little secret had just exploded in the worst possible way. I should feel bad, but honestly, Matthew made it so easy. He never questioned anything, never asked for proof, just accepted everything I told him like the good little husband he is. The rain was still falling when I slipped back outside to my truck. I sat there for 20 minutes watching water streak down the windshield before I finally understood what I had to do. This was not about anger anymore. This was about justice. I had met Trina 15 years ago at a teachers' conference in Dallas. She was working as a substitute teacher then, beautiful and charming with a laugh that made everyone in the room turn to look. I was 28, fresh out of graduate school, and completely smitten. We married after 3 years of dating, and Sophie arrived 2 years later. I threw myself into being the kind of father I had always wanted. My own dad had worked construction and was never around much, so I made sure to be present for everything. Every school play, every soccer game, every scraped knee. When Tyler came along 2 years after Sophie, I felt like my life was complete. But now, sitting in my truck, I started remembering things differently. How Trina always seemed to have weekend plans that did not include me. How she would take the kids to visit her sister in San Antonio, but they never brought back any pictures or stories. How she managed our finances and always seemed to have money for things we had not budgeted for. Eric Sloan. I knew the name. He was a contractor who had done some work on our house 3 years ago. Trina had insisted we hire him despite his higher bid, saying she trusted him more than the other guys. He was good-looking in that rugged way that made women notice him. I remembered how Trina had always found reasons to be outside when he was working, bringing him iced tea and making conversation. The timeline was starting to make sense in the worst possible way. Tyler was 8. Eric had worked on our house 3 years ago, but Trina could have known him longer. Sophie was 10. That went back even further. I thought about how Trina always insisted on handling the kids' doctor appointments alone. How she had their birth certificates and social security cards locked in a filing cabinet I never had reason to access. How she had been adamant about not wanting me in the delivery room for Tyler, claiming it was too personal and she needed her space. The signs had been there all along, but I had been too trusting to see them. Too focused on being a good husband and father to question whether the family I was working so hard to support was even mine. My phone buzzed with a text from Trina. "Where are you? Thought you were coming home early." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Storm delayed us. We'll be home late. Do not wait up. The lie came easily. Apparently, I was not the only one in this marriage who had learned how to deceive. I drove around Austin for 2 hours that night, my mind racing through 13 years of memories, looking for cracks in the foundation of everything I had believed. When I finally went home, Trina was asleep and I stood in the doorway of the kids' rooms, studying their faces in the dim light from the hallway. Sophie had always been told she had my stubborn streak. Tyler supposedly had my hands, but looking at them now with fresh eyes and a broken heart, I could see it. The shape of Tyler's jaw, the way Sophie's hair grew in a cowlick at the back, details I had never noticed because I had never had a reason to look. I spent the next morning teaching my advanced biology class about genetic inheritance and Punnett squares, explaining to 17-year-olds how traits passed from parents to children. The irony was suffocating. Here I was teaching the science of heredity while being completely blind to it in my own home. During my lunch break, I sat in my empty classroom and made a decision. I was not going to confront Trina. I was not going to have some dramatic scene where I demanded the truth and gave her a chance to lie her way out of it or turn the tables on me somehow. This situation required a different approach. I opened my laptop and started researching paternity testing, divorce lawyers, child custody laws in Texas, financial records, and how to protect assets. I had always been methodical in my approach to problems, and this was going to be the most important problem I had ever solved. By the time school ended that day, I had a plan forming. Trina thought she was clever, thought she had me completely fooled. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated exactly how smart I could be when I needed to be. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with my family, listening to Sophie talk about her upcoming science fair project, and Tyler complain about his math homework. Trina smiled at me across the table, playing the role of loving wife and mother, never suspecting that I knew the truth. "You seem quiet tonight," she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Everything okay?" I looked into her eyes, these eyes that had lied to me for over a decade, and smiled back. "Just thinking about how much our family means to me," I said. "How I would do anything to protect what we have built together." She squeezed my hand again. "You are such a good man, Matthew. I am so lucky to have you." I squeezed back, my smile never wavering. "I feel exactly the same way." But inside, something had shifted. I was no longer the naive husband who took everything at face value. I was a man with a plan, and I was going to see it through to the end. 3 weeks passed before I made my first move. I had spent every free moment gathering information, documenting patterns, and building my case. The hardest part was acting normal around Trina and the kids, pretending everything was fine while my world had been turned upside down. I started by scheduling paternity tests. Not the kind you could buy at the drugstore, but proper legal tests that would hold up in court. I told the lab technician I needed them for insurance purposes. A white lie that got me the paperwork I needed without raising suspicions. Getting the samples was easier than I had expected. A few strands of hair from their hairbrushes gathered while they were at school. Saliva samples from cups they had used at breakfast, collected and stored properly. For myself, I simply went to the lab directly during my lunch break. While I waited for those results, I began the financial investigation. Trina handled most of our banking, but I had access to the statements. What I found made my stomach turn. Withdrawals I did not remember authorizing. Transfers to accounts I had never heard of. Money that should have been going into our children's college funds was disappearing into thin air. I hired a private investigator named Janet Morris, a former police detective who specialized in adultery cases. I paid her with money from an old savings account Trina did not know about. One I had opened years ago with the inheritance from my grandmother. "I need to know everything," I told Janet during our first meeting at a coffee shop downtown. "How long this has been going on where they meet everything?" Janet was professional and straightforward. "This is going to hurt," she warned me. "Are you sure you want to know the extent of it?" I thought about Trina laughing on the phone, calling me the ultimate idiot. "I am sure." The paternity results came back first. The official language was cold and clinical, but the meaning was clear. There was zero probability that I was the biological father of either Sophie or Tyler. Seeing it in black and white hit me harder than I had expected. Even though I had been preparing for this outcome, I sat in my truck in the lab parking lot, staring at the papers that confirmed my worst fears. These kids I had raised, loved, and protected for their entire lives were not mine. Every birthday party, every bedtime story, every proud moment had been built on a lie. But then I thought about something else. Biology did not make me their father. Love did. Care did. Being there every day for 10 and 8 years did. Whatever else was true. Whatever Trina had done, these kids were still my children in every way that mattered. The difference was now I was going to fight for them properly. Janet's first report arrived 2 days later, and it was worse than I had imagined. She had photographs, credit card receipts, hotel records going back years. Trina and Eric had not just been having an affair. They had been living a double life. Weekend trips that Trina told me were visits to her sister were actually romantic getaways. The money missing from our accounts had been funding their relationship. The most damaging evidence was a recording Janet had made of Trina and Eric talking at a restaurant. They were discussing their plans for the future, how they would eventually move in together, and how they would break the news to the kids about who their real father was. They talked about me like I was a temporary inconvenience, someone who would just fade away once they were ready to be a real family. I listened to that recording 3 times, sitting alone in my classroom after school. Each time it felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but it also strengthened my resolve. They thought I was weak. Thought I was stupid. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The deeper I dug, the more elaborate the deception became. Janet discovered that Eric had been in Trina's life since before we were married. They had dated in college, broken up when he moved to Houston for work, but had reconnected when he moved back to Austin 5 years later. That was 2 years into our marriage, right around the time Sophie was born. The timeline was becoming clear, and it was devastating. Our entire relationship had been a lie from almost the very beginning. I had been the stable option, the reliable husband who could provide for her and the children while she maintained her real relationship with Eric on the side. I found evidence of a joint bank account that Trina and Eric shared, one that had been active for 7 years. Money had been flowing from our household into this account regularly. Money that I had earned teaching high school kids about science was being used to fund their secret life together. But the worst discovery came when Janet showed me property records. Eric and Trina had purchased a house together 3 years ago using money that had come from our joint savings account. They had been planning this for years, building toward a future that did not include me. They are just waiting for the right time, Janet explained, showing me photographs of the house. It was in a nice neighborhood with a big backyard and good schools nearby. Based on what I have observed, I think they are planning to make their move soon. I stared at the pictures of the house where my children were apparently destined to live with their real father and the woman who had been lying to me for over a decade. The house that I had unknowingly helped pay for that night. I did something I had never done before. I went through Trina's phone while she was in the shower. The evidence I found there was overwhelming. Text messages between her and Eric going back years filled with intimate details about their relationship and cruel jokes about me. Messages about the kids discussing how to handle the transition when they finally told them the truth. One message thread made me physically ill. They had been discussing how to minimize the damage when they finally revealed everything. Eric wanted to tell the kids gradually. Let them get used to the idea. Trina was pushing for a clean break, arguing that it would be easier on everyone if they just ripped the bandage off all at once. The longer we wait, the harder it will be on them, Eric had written. They deserve to know who their real father is. Matthew will probably want visitation, Trina had replied. We need to be prepared for that fight. Let him try, Eric had responded. Blood is blood. No court is going to give him custody when the truth comes out. I put the phone back exactly where I had found it and went to bed, lying there in the dark next to the woman who had been planning to destroy my life for years. She rolled over in her sleep and put her arm across my chest, the same gesture of affection that had once made me feel loved and secure. Now it felt like a snake coiling around me. But Eric was wrong about one thing. I was not going to fight for visitation. I was going to fight for full custody. And I was going to win because I had something they did not. The truth properly documented in a plan they never saw coming. I gave myself one more week to finalize everything. Every detail had to be perfect. Every piece of evidence properly documented and legally sound. I was not going to give them any opportunity to twist the narrative or make me look like the bad guy. The first step was securing legal representation. I hired Catherine Walsh, one of the best family law attorneys in Austin. She was expensive, but after seeing Janet's evidence and the paternity test results, she was confident we had a strong case. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of fraud I have seen, she told me during our consultation. The financial deception alone is grounds for significant damages, but when you add in the paternity issue and the evidence of long-term planning to exclude you from the children's lives, we have a very strong position. I liquidated the savings account Trina did not know about and moved the money into a new account at a different bank. I also opened a safety deposit box and stored copies of all the evidence there. If Trina tried to destroy anything or claim I had fabricated the proof, I would have backups that she could not access. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. Every day I had to pretend everything was normal while knowing that our entire life together was about to implode. I helped Sophie with her science fair project, attended Tyler's baseball games, and had dinner conversations with Trina about our plans for the summer. But I was also laying groundwork. I started documenting my relationship with the kids, taking pictures and videos of our time together, saving school papers and report cards, gathering evidence that I had been their primary caregiver in every meaningful way. Biology might not make me their father, but I was going to prove that I was the parent who had actually raised them. 2 weeks before I planned to execute my plan, Trina handed me an opportunity I had not expected. She announced that she wanted to take a weekend trip with her girlfriends to San Antonio for her birthday. Just a girls' weekend, she said, showing me the hotel reservation on her phone. Ashley is organizing the whole thing. We have not done something like this in years. I knew it was a lie. Janet had already confirmed that Eric would be in San Antonio that weekend for a construction project, but I smiled and told her it sounded like a great idea, that she deserved to have some fun with her friends. Are you sure you can handle the kids by yourself for 3 days? She asked with just a hint of condescension in her voice. I think I can manage, I replied, fighting to keep my voice level. I have been their father for 10 and 8 years. I know their routines. The irony of that statement was not lost on either of us, though for different reasons. That weekend became my deadline. By the time Trina returned from San Antonio, everything would be in motion. The legal papers would be filed, the evidence would be submitted, and the life she had built on lies would start crumbling around her. I spent the next 2 weeks saying goodbye to the life I had known. Even though no one else realized that was what I was doing, I memorized the sound of the kids laughing at breakfast. The way the morning light came through our kitchen window, the feeling of being part of a family that I had thought was real. It was going to be the last time any of those things felt innocent. After this weekend, everything would be different. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. Friday afternoon, I kissed Trina goodbye and watched her drive away to her fake girls' weekend. The kids were spending the night at my sister's house, something I had arranged to keep them away from what was about to happen. By Monday morning, everything was in motion. I served the divorce papers first, having them delivered to Trina's office where her co-workers could see. Then I filed for emergency custody of both children, supported by the DNA evidence and Janet's documentation of Trina's deception. The financial fraud charges came next with bank records showing exactly where our money had gone. But the piece that would destroy her completely was the letter I had Catherine prepare for Eric's wife. Yes, Eric was married. Janet had discovered that particular detail 3 weeks into her investigation. His wife Diana had no idea about his double life with Trina or about the children he had fathered while married to her. Diana received copies of everything. The paternity tests, the photos, the bank records, the property documents, everything that proved her husband had been living a lie for years. When Trina returned from San Antonio on Sunday evening, she found an empty house. I had moved out over the weekend, taking only what was mine and leaving behind a single envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a copy of everything. The DNA results, the custody petition, the evidence of financial fraud, and a letter I had written. You called me the ultimate idiot, the letter read. You laughed about how clueless I was, how easy it was to deceive me for 12 years. You were right about one thing. I was foolish to trust you. But you made one critical mistake. You underestimated exactly how smart I could be when I needed to be. While you were building your secret life with Eric, I was building a case that will destroy everything you thought you had secured. The children you used as pawns in your game deserve better than parents who lie to them about their very identity. I will fight for them with everything I have, and I will win because unlike you, I actually put their interests first. The legal battle lasted 6 months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Trina's lies had been too extensive, too well documented, and too damaging for any court to ignore. I was awarded full custody of both Sophie and Tyler, with Trina granted supervised visitation only. The financial judgment was devastating for her. She was ordered to repay every dollar she had stolen from our accounts, plus damages and legal fees. The house she had bought with Eric was seized as part of the settlement. Eric's marriage imploded within weeks. Diana filed for divorce and took half of everything he owned, including his construction business. His reputation in Austin was destroyed when word spread about his decade-long deception. He moved back to Houston, leaving Trina to face the consequences alone. Trina lost her teaching job when the school district learned about the fraud charges. Her family and friends, disgusted by the extent of her lies, cut ties with her. She moved into a small apartment across town, working retail to make ends meet and paying monthly restitution that would take her years to complete. The kids adjusted better than I had expected. I told them the truth in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the fact that families are built on love and commitment, not just biology. They continued to call me Dad because that is what I had always been to them. We moved to a smaller house in a different part of Austin, starting fresh but together. Sophie still loves science and Tyler still plays baseball. They visit their mother twice a month under court supervision, but they come home to me. Looking back, I realize that sometimes the best revenge is not about destroying someone else, but about saving yourself and the people you love from their lies.